Cool. Hi.
Good morning. We're awake.
Good morning. I hope everyone's awake after the litany of happy hours last night. By 11 a.m., hopefully the effects are waking off. And welcome to our session. We're going to talk about keeping collaborating and carrying on from pre-construction into operations. And just by way of introduction, I'm Andrew Skoski. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm the CEO at Join Inc. My background's in software engineering. Been working in and around the construction industry for a decade now, which has sort of become this very passionate thing for me. And I'm fortunate to work with firms who are here on the stage, and then a few other faces that I can spot in the audience. And yeah, that's me. I'm the tech guy. Avocado toast, California. Mike.
Sure. Good morning. Mike Clark. I'm Vice President of Pre-Construction and Planning for Commodore Builders. I've been in the industry probably about 25 years now. Started as a superintendent, worked my way through the ranks, and now I'm here.
Good morning, everyone. Derek Fitzgerald. I am our Senior Vice President of Operations for McCarthy in the Bay Area and San Francisco. Been in the industry for more than 10 years now. Started my career in operations in the field. Spent most of the time in pre-construction using the Join tool, and now kind of running our day-to-day operations in San Francisco.
Great. So today we're going to talk through sort of three things and then open up for Q&A at the end. We're going to talk through a little bit of background on what the heck this Join thing is and why anyone might be interested in it. We're going to talk through a little bit of sort of the core Join use case in pre-construction. And then we're going to talk through the case study that motivated a new integration that we have with the Procore platform that's focused on bridging the gray area and gaps between operations and pre-construction when the two sets of activities are happening concurrently. And two case studies along the way. It'll be a lot of fun, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So I'll kick it off with the technology stuff. For those who are not familiar, Join is a collaborative project delivery platform. We're 100% focused on the needs of construction manager at risk, design, build, IPD, these collaborative delivery methods where construction teams get involved very early in the process while the design is still evolving and are asked to provide cost and constructability feedback along the way as the design evolves. And before Join, we sat with Derek and others when we were doing discovery around this thing, and it was clear that a lot of this was being handled in spreadsheets and email, and that this was leaving a ton of value on the table, and was a poor way to communicate with owners when you're, frankly, often communicating bad news every week, and need the owner to get comfortable with the information, develop trust with the team, and then make the decisions that are going to move it forward. And so this diagram is representing the transition that the industry is going through, where the transition from a traditional project delivery, right, the design, bid, build methodology to present methodologies, which might be a mixture of construction manager at risk or CMGC or design build. But the key feature being that pre-construction activities and design activities are happening concurrently. And then often operational activities are also beginning. And so some early scopes are being released to the field, and so operations is often running, and pre-con is often running, and this time is what we call the gray area, and it's what we'll get to in a couple of case studies. So Join connects the right people to the right information to drive decisions. That's the key thing. It might be a cost decision, it might be a design decision, it might be something that impacts schedule. We have data on this from the thousands of projects that have run Join nationwide, and typical projects, the owner needs to make a couple thousand decisions throughout the pre-construction phase. And if you do a little bit of math on that, it turns into you need the owner to make 5 decisions every workday through a pre-construction phase. And these decisions might touch multiple scopes, they might be emotional, they might be bad news to the owner. They can't have something that maybe the design team put in front of them and they immediately fell in love with. And Join provides cloud-based software that pulls this together and makes that communication easy. And so product's been in the market about 6 years now, working with these firms and number of others in the audience across the country, really wide range of project types, really wide range of project sizes, that sort of thing. And yeah, I have 3 visuals to just convey this really quickly, and if you want to learn more about the product or see a demo or something, we've got a booth in the expo hall. So Join's this cloud-based visual solution where you're able to bring together pre-construction staff from the general contractor, design management staff from the general contractor, owners representatives, architects, engineers, potentially trade partners, and have people contribute their puzzle pieces to the overall picture, be able to see the overall view, and then be able to, in real time, present that information up to owners in ways that drives transparency and trust at the owner level. Yeah, that's Join in a nutshell. Oh, and integrations. So we've always had a stance of integrating with best-in-breed solutions, and so we're deeply integrated with the world of estimating tools. The thing we're here to sort of announce, it's been out for a few weeks, is this integration with Procore change events. And here, the problem that we're looking at is this challenge that emerges when pre-construction and operations are ongoing concurrently, and changes that happen in the wacky world of design and pre-con might need to impact scopes that are already under contract, or changes that sort of bubble up from the field in some way might need to impact and be tracked and trended with the overall picture that's being provided to the owner. And so that's the gray area, that's the Procore change event integration that we're excited to talk through a little bit of the motivation for. But maybe before that, like, this guy from California just blabbered at me for a while and threw some screenshots up way too quickly for me to understand it. Like, why would I want to use Join? And maybe with that, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, so Andrew just gave you an overview. I think it's important to sort of reiterate, it's not an estimating platform, but for us, for everybody, it is an information hub. And, you know, there were really three issues that we were trying to solve in our pre-construction process at Commodore. And Join really helped us get through those. And just to list those out quickly, the first one was just internal communication, right? So how do our teams talk when we're in pre-con, right? You know, we're looking at a project here that I'll get into a little more, but you know, as you're looking at something like this, there's a lot of questions that come across from the various team members. You know, at Commodore, we have an estimating department that's spread across multiple disciplines. We have a planning and scheduling team, a VDC team. Of course, we want to bring in the ops teams, the superintendents, the project managers. So how do you take all that information and get that into the estimate, and getting it in a way that's effective, that the estimators can deal with it? That was a real challenge for us, right? The shared spreadsheets, they weren't getting it done. The periodic meetings we would have, or just the drop-ins to offices. Again, a lot of that stuff wasn't getting in the estimates, wasn't getting represented as risk, and ultimately wasn't really getting resolved, right? So that's the first challenge, right? And there are three of them that I want to outline, and then the fourth one that I'll introduce. The second one, you take everything I just talked about now, and then communicate that to your clients, right? How do you take all that information and bring that to the market, right? How do you do that at a proposal stage or at any stage of pre-construction? So in a lot of ways, Join has become our go-to selling tool, which is before pre-con, but it really is a great way to communicate what you're thinking and sort of help to start the leveling process before you even get there for the clients. And then the third thing, really just in response to client requests and design team requests, was what are you going to do when you're involved in pre-con? How are you going to drive our budget to where it needs to be? And from the design team specifically, how much access are we going to have to your estimators? Like, I don't want to wait 3 months for my next set of drawings to be completed to find out that the decisions we were making put us 15% over here and 10% over there. So, you know, how do we fix that, right? Because it's not working, especially at the speed at which things are going. So I think to further kind of hammer down on these, it's good to talk about these with a real example, and the project that you're seeing here is something we are working on. So this is an amenity space in a 60-story high-rise, and you know, it was really presented in 2 phases. The first phase was a structural and demolition package to create the double height space that you see there. And this is on one of the lower floors of the building, right? And the ask there was a competitive GMP, right? So a guaranteed maximum price, if you don't know what that is. The second phase was the fit out. This is a pretty high cost per square foot fit out, and it was presented to us probably somewhere between concept and schematic. And the ask wasn't nail the budget. It was just give us a budget and then tell us how you're going to align your budget with our budget and do it within the timeline that keeps the project on schedule. So, we had to take all this information, get it all together and, you know, bring that to a presentation pretty quickly. And if you could flip the slide there. So, you know, the first thing the team started to do is just what I said. We started to dig in on the project. This is the first phase. So, you know, the entire team starts getting together and digging in on the phasing of the project. We had to build a sequence model to understand the phasing of this. Of course, we're given an end condition, but, you know, there's a lot of things that aren't on the drawing pages, logistical costs, you know, means and methods type stuff, and really just risk and impact, right? So in going through this process, you know, it became pretty clear we're going to affect an adjacent elevator bank. There's impacts to the curtain wall system and making sure that's secure throughout the demo process. And a lot of MEP systems had to be moved temporarily to accommodate the bracing. So, you know, what's happening here is we're developing our budget. We're also developing a lot of risk and opportunity. But what's really happening is we're starting to enter into kind of dangerous territory when we go into a presentation. Like I said, we probably got less than an hour to present on these two projects, talk about the qualifications of our team, our schedule, 10 other things they wanted to know about. And the risk there is that we show up with a price that's quite a bit higher than everyone else, and the owner doesn't digest that. So we use Join to really separate what's true cost versus what is risk, and then talk about how we're going to drive it where it needs to be in the budget, right? Very, very powerful tool at that stage. And I can tell you, I don't know where all the numbers laid out. I know we were not the low bidder here, but we did win this project. So, you know, we went through and executed. You can see here, you know, the actual model versus some of the actual in-field installation. You know, we got through that phase. It went really well. And we moved on to the next phase, which really, again, was that second request was, now how do you take the schematic level budget that we have and your budget, reconcile those and drive us towards, you know, the right numbers and the right schedule? We didn't have a lot of time to do this. As everyone knows, like, construction moves pretty quickly these days. We had already started the demo phase. We knew once we got past design development that we were going to have to start releasing trades. So, you know, this is where the feedback with the design team really comes into play. You know, you start reconciling the budget with what they're thinking. You start clarifying materials. I don't want to flip back to the previous slide, but there's a lot of floor finishes there. Those carpet, is that stone. So you really get to work through line by line, trade by trade, not only the decisions about what's driving the budget, but also resolving risk. And you can do it in a very organized way, in a way that happens continuously. So I can tell you it took probably 3 months to go from schematic to design development. When we got to design development, we still weren't where we needed to be, but we were making enough progress, and the owner was comfortable with the progress we were making and where we were heading, that we were able to then release the next phase of trades to keep the project moving. And then ultimately, you know, we worked it towards the GMP. Again, still not completely where we needed to be, but very, very close. And we got to release the full project. So that kind of brings us to the sort of fourth challenge, right? And this is something that we've been seeing for quite some time on all projects, except for the very small ones, is it's really a question I get asked all the time, is when does pre-construction end, right? When does your team disengage? And the answer is, I don't know. It doesn't just end on some Friday afternoon in a meeting where we hand off the project. It's this gray area. In this project in particular, you know, we had multiple releases of packages. You know, the construction team was off and running once we started that demo and structural phase. They had moved on to our financial platform and focus on that. And then as we released more packages. So, you know, for us, we just switched our platform over to Procore Financial, so all of our financial controls will go through there. I'm really excited that now we can connect back to Join in both directions, right, and keep those teams connected through the whole process. But with that, Derek has more experience and some exciting projects to talk about where he actually did utilize this. So I'm going to hand it off to you to talk about that now.
Thanks, Mike. So give me a show of hands. Does this sound familiar where you're designing and you're building at the same time? Has anyone experienced that? Almost all of us. So we want to talk a little more about that, right? And excited to be sitting here today. Like Andrew mentioned, we were one of the first general contractors to kind of sit here and develop Join. So I want to tell kind of a story around how we're using that tool on a big project in the Bay Area. We've got more than 400 projects in Join now, and really focus in on a case study around the YouTube headquarters expansion just outside San Francisco. Kind of on our next slide here. So a little bit of background. This is a 300,000 square foot project just outside the city. YouTube took over the original Gap headquarters that was built back in the 1990s. They had about a 200,000 square foot building that they were using as HQ, and they were looking at doing this massive campus expansion. So 300,000 square feet, another 250,000 square feet of subgrade parking below one of the structures, all across 2 mass timber buildings. And this was McCarthy's first time working with Google, so we know we had to bring out all the stops. We had to prove ourselves, and for those of you that have done work with them, they have really high expectations. So we weren't going to drop the ball on any of this. So as we were kind of getting into the project, we got onboarded in a concept design. They had William McDonough on board as the designer, and we got brought on board in a design build contract. So there was this huge call for collaboration, and Google was really driving a lot of that. We were as well. So we brought our own AOR. We brought a design consultant team. You have your AHJs and your inspectors. We've got our design build trade partners, and then of course Google's internal design team and hundreds of end users. So as we're kind of going through this phase of the project during the design, we're upwards of 150 people collaborating in real time using the Join tool. And that was really important because as we look at the timeline here on the next slide, it was a very interesting timing for the project. So we got on board at Q4 of 2019, and COVID decided to bless us with its presence right after that, which was perfect to derail our plans for a big co-located room. So that, highly collaborative space and online virtual ability to do that in real time became super paramount to the success of this project. So we're starting to get involved in the design phase. We're working through the design process. We're trying to pull together a core and shell design package by October of 2020. And all of this was in an effort for us to be able to break ground by the end of 2020. There was a really unique challenge related to that. So Google had inherited the original entitlements that Gap got back in the 1990s, and the entitlements were getting ready to expire at the end of 2020. And to keep those entitlements active, we had to put a shovel in the ground and actually start digging the hole for the subgrade parking garage. Otherwise, Google was going to have to go re-entitle the entire project. And for those of you that have done anything in California, know that takes way longer than it needs to. So that was a non-starter. So we were kind of racing, and Mike was talking a lot about the gray area, right? And this put us in this perfect storm of the gray area because we're trying to break ground. So we've got this grading and this mass excavation going on at the end of 2020. At the same time, we're working through a core and shell design package that's going to follow suit on that. And with COVID hitting, Google decided to pause their interior build out because they were re-envisioning what the workplace was going to look like in a post-COVID era. So we kind of paused the interior TI, the design on that. So we're in this gray area. We're actually building, we've core and shell designing, and we're thinking about what the TI might look like. So Google had some lofty goals on this project here on their next slide. And everything that McCarthy does when we're looking at these collaborative design build projects, we start with what we call the conditions of satisfaction, where we're pulling together all of the partners and the user groups, and we're defining what our North Star wants to be. What are we all working towards? So in a complex project like this, Google had 3 simple things that they wanted to do. They wanted to update the 1990s entitled design and create this world-class office space. They wanted to be able to prioritize their user experience. So all of the decisions we were making were around the user experience and ensuring that was top tier in the industry. And then they were really focused on sustainability. They wanted this climate positive campus. So we were looking at mass timber structures. We had a central utility plant, battery storage, PV, a 300,000 gallon underground cistern for rainwater collection, and a lot of complexities to help them achieve these sustainability goals. So as we're going through this, we're utilizing Join. The design phase is going great. And we're able to give them this really transparent feedback and information like Mike was talking about that lets them kind of get that certainty and understanding of where the cost is at any point in time. But what we were finding here kind of on our next slide is as we were using Join to be able to track the cost through the design phase and look at our cost savings ideas and that continuous estimating, we're also digging a hole in the ground and starting our mass excavation. The structure's starting to come up out of the ground. So we're managing field change events. We're managing design happening. They do decide to push the TI forward. So we're 2 milestone iterations behind in that kind of phase of the project as well, and trying to manage all this at once. So Google was having an incredible time with Join, and they really appreciated the collaboration and transparency that was kind of coming out of that tool. So they wanted to continue to use it. So we carried that through into construction to use it to track things like the field events, contingency draws, allowance use, but we're still managing that design phase too, right? So our teams were finding that they were doing a lot of double entry. We were tracking the items in Join so they could see that real-time cost at any point in time, but then we're also having to create field change events in Procore for the financial backbone of the project. And this was creating a lot of inefficiencies. Our teams were doing a bunch of double entry. It was creating risk around things not either getting inputted in time, maybe misinputted between the two platforms. So we had to spend a lot of time kind of staying on top of that. And through this wildly successful project, what came out of that was this integration with Procore. And what this allowed us to do, and kind of the impetus of creating this, was being able to create a cost item in Join, and through the integration, this can actually push that into a change event in Procore. So it's helping us eliminate the double entry of work. It's helping us bring better insight and that transparency through those real-time cost information at a much faster pace, close out our change events faster with the client, and ultimately be able to give them that certainty that they're looking for, where they can visualize that through the dashboard, but we can manage it in a much more seamless way kind of in the financial background, and really helping us address that gray area that we were talking about. So, want to bring us home, Andrew?
Yeah, I can bring us home. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Derek. That's two case study projects on use of Join with particular focus on this gray area. And so just to recap on Join before we break into Q&A here, Join's a collaborative project delivery platform that serves as that information hub throughout pre-construction activities. And so that's from pursuit or proposal, maybe pre-con, all the way through GMP and now beyond. Yeah, I had like 2 questions for you guys, maybe to kick it off, and we'll open it up for the audience as well if people want to raise hands here in a second. These are really exciting projects you brought up, right? Like, I don't know how many core and shells get built and then like demo a double height like amenity space with that quality of furnishes. But if I'm ever in, the Boston area, I would love to be able to hang out there, obviously. And YouTube very much a like singular owner. Are the challenges of the gray area like reserved for those sorts of like very singular projects, or is this a broader trend that's sort of showing up across a wide portfolio of the work that you do?
I'd say like definitely a growing trend in the industry. We could tell by the hands that were raised, earlier. I think as we look at delivering these assets a lot faster and being able to give these clients their projects at a much faster pace in construction, we're going to see a lot more of that overlap because you can only build something so fast, right? And really the opportunity zone that I like to think about is in that upfront design, permitting, and kind of pre-construction space where you can start to build sooner and overlap some of these packages and create these breakout permit packages that allow you to get a shovel on the ground faster, ultimately bringing up your delivery date, but still be able to kind of push your design forward. So I think we're going to see more and more of this gray area across all of the industries and market sectors.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, like I said, all but the smallest of projects, because of the speed that the way the industry moves because of procurement really coming out of COVID. I would say every single one of our projects has some level of early release packages, probably around design development. And that transition, at that point, our estimating team stays involved even beyond the GMP. They're involved with releasing the packages. So it's really, it's far more prevalent. Electrical equipment is one thing alone that it's almost an automatic. We're typically releasing switchgear transformers even at schematic levels or earlier. So I don't think it's going away.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll open up for the audience. Anybody got a question? Okay, right there.
Since you just brought up electrical mechanical, how do you get your engineers pulled back into the design phase enough because usually they don't even put out a design development package?
Great. I'm just going to repeat the question for the audience. So speaking of electrical, I think the question was, how do you get your electrical mechanical engineers pulled back into this process? Because they might not have the resources, they might not engage around design development even?
Right.
Yeah.
In order to release those early packages, because they drive the project.
Yeah, it's extremely challenging, right? So what we typically do, we're always putting a schedule together with every estimate. So that will usually pop early. Like I said, electrical equipment is almost automatic. Mechanical equipment is highly variable. So we'll start by checking with all of our vendors. And we do have some in-house engineering too that knows more how to engage with them directly. So really we just use the schedule as a tool. And we'll typically use the Join platform to host what we've covered in the budget, what equipment specs might already be there. Oftentimes, we're taking over at basis of design to answer your question. We're just communicating, we have to have equipment specs, we have to have performance specs. And then in some cases, we take it from there. But in a lot of cases, the engineers they'll understand the schedule and they'll deliver to us what we need. In the Boston area, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, we primarily perform in the Boston area. Getting approvals from the electrical companies and getting transformers through them also takes an extremely long time. So the engineers are already familiar with that on an electrical side, but mechanically, like I said, we typically will take that process over internally and then we'll assign it to trades later.
I think that engagement of the trade partners is something that we're doing a lot more too, right? So like where you may traditionally have brought your electrical contractor on later in the design phase or even in DDs or something, like we're bringing them on at concept design now and making sure that they're engaged super early so they can give us really accurate information around the lead times. They're probably bringing some of their in-house engineering team and helping create these solutions with the engineer of record, if they aren't that, to be able to drive that decision making early, and then trying to create equipment that has some flexibility in it. So as the design ebbs and flows, like we're not boxed in with gear that's sized perfectly for what they need, but we're potentially oversizing that a little bit or paying for that to be a little bit more flexible, just in a matter of being able to get it there as fast as we need it.
And that's another thing to sort of pile on to that, because the engineers will say, well, I can't design the equipment yet. I don't understand the envelope performance of the building, right? So those are all items that we would have to use Join to sort of project what the cost may or may not be and what decisions still need to be made.
Great, thank you. I think there's another.
You dropped a term, cost certainty, and I'm very curious at how the tool gets to cost certainty, like kind of the nuts and bolts of what is the client seeing that goes, hey, I'm comfortable with this TBD, maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the question there was just like, we mentioned cost certainty, and how do we get to cost certainty, and how does the tool, the Join tool, drive cost certainty? And what does the client see that gives them confidence around this? And so I'm going to pull up one sort of iconic visual here, which is a dashboard. And we've got a booth. We're happy to do demos at length. But like one of these key ones is this cost trend line over time. And so this is illustrating in black where the project is moment by moment, day by day. Every dot that might be hard to see in the back is a particular decision that's happened. It's when the owner said like, yeah, we can go with the cheaper bathroom fixtures, or like, nope, we got to have the wood paneling on the ceiling. Like, yep, we'll take the cost add from there. The yellow area is what's on the table. It's potential adds, it's potential deducts that might impact it. Everything that's on the table. And by I mean, I can actually hand the mic over here, but by like letting owners see this as it develops, to see the items potentially before the cost is associated with it, they develop more trust in the data that's behind it, and so they're less like questioning. Like, I mean, the anecdote that I love, like that we got early on that helped us out with this was a company that's now a customer of ours in the Sacramento area. They were doing a $100 million medical job. They were doing somewhere in DD, I think. They were doing like a page turn, and someone was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have equipment in that room, so we're gonna need another outlet in there." And like the owner like throws out like, "Okay, like an outlet, like how much could that cost?" And the GC says like, "An outlet, $1,000. Like, let's move on, because it's a $100 million job. It's one outlet. It's $1,000. Who cares? Move on." But the owner cared. It turned out, and a week later, the owner showed up pissed off and like starts the meeting by pouring a bag from Home Depot onto the table, and out tumbles like a socket, like an electrical socket, and a bit of conduit, and a bit of wire, and like all the parts and pieces you'd need to put it in. And the client like goes on a rampage and says like, "How can you tell me it costs $1,000 to add an outlet? Like, how can you tell me and sit there and tell me that I bought everything I need from Home Depot for $49? Like, how can it cost $1,000?" And it's like, whoa, this isn't about the outlet, right? Like. And the challenge there, right, was the owner like didn't understand. Like, they're not construction experts. Like, if they were construction experts, like we wouldn't have to be here to a certain extent. And by bringing people in and giving something that they can refer to, like, and that they can see the information develop in, like they come to trust the data more, so that you don't have to like convince them that an outlet costs $1,000 when you factor in the fact that it's a medical job, and so the discount parts from Home Depot like aren't going to cover it, right? And so that like, I mean, and that's like that lack of trust just like speaks to like the challenges that come from owners, where like if the owner is questioning $1,000 decision on a $100 million job, like how the heck are you gonna get through like design development? I mean, you're gonna have to make like multi-million dollar like decisions. If they like don't trust you on an outlet, like how are you gonna get this project to move forward? And so, yeah, anyway, I don't know, Mike, Derek, any
Yeah.
comments?
I have a couple, so a specific and then a more general one. A specific example, you know, we were starting very early on a lab building. It was about a $300 million project. It was a repurposed office building, and we were going to build vertically 2 levels for the penthouse. And very early on, our estimating team had identified we're probably going to need to upgrade the steel frame. So we're going to need more lateral bracing, perhaps increase the columns, you know. And the architect kind of shot that down and said, no, this building was built in the late 80s. We think the frame is adequate. We don't think that's going to be an issue. But of course, they hadn't engaged their structural engineering team yet, right? So, you know, the cost was in there, identified as a potential risk. It wasn't necessarily represented on the documents at that stage. And we rejected it. We killed it. There was a record of that. Architect doesn't think we need this. Well, fast forward a few months, next set of drawings, the engineers are involved. We had increased the wind loading on the building enough with the new floors that it triggered a code upgrade with a lateral upgrade, and $9 million worth of steel got added into the budget, right? So was the client happy about that? No, but they weren't as upset as your client with the outlets. They understood. We had outlaid it as a risk. They chose, you know, not to engage with it. Another sort of general example of that is, you know, we do tend to get hung up on exactly what's on the documents at every stage, right? But design contingency is something that a lot of times the owners will want to handle, or it becomes very vague. So we'll use the Join platform to manage that contingency really well, because that's where, I mean, we're not going to know exactly what gets designed or all the decisions that are going to be made, but we do know where things are going to trend from other history and just from speaking with the design team. So using that contingency management is a really powerful tool. So that in the example I had given, just to sort of end on this, we didn't quite get there at GMP where they wanted it to be. We were about $2 million over on a $40 million project, which isn't bad. And they were okay with that. It was within range of what we had projected it to be. So yes, they still wanted to do some VE and drive the number down, but it wasn't one of these situations where they looked at us like we misrepresented the cost of the work.
I think the other thing, just like kind of final thought here, that the tool allows you to do is, and Andrew, I think it might be in the next slide, you can see it in the bottom, but it allows you to set target values by system. And a lot of what we do is like target value delivery, right? So we're able to like, you're going to go build a $300 million project. The owner wants to build it for $250 million. By system, we're going to say, hey, we want to target the mechanical system as X dollars, the electrical's X dollars, the skin's X dollars. You can visualize all of that in the tool, so it gives us better transparency, and then it creates this really iterative process. So these functional teams are going to drive towards that target, which is your certainty, right? And you're seeing all of that happen in real time versus like that age-old, like, okay, every 3 months we're going to do a milestone update and we have no idea where the cost is trending. So it just gives that transparency, I think, is really what helps drive that certainty.
Thanks, Derek. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, we have a few more minutes and we're going to hold people. So one thing that like we've heard from a few of our teams is about, and this isn't a joint thing, this is like a collaborative project delivery thing, just like it's the difference in like the team's experience of like these collaborative projects when they're run well. I was just wondering if you guys could comment on that, just like what it means for like the people who engage on these teams like day to day and how they feel when they're driving home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, kind of building on the thought that I just talked about, I think you create this tool what this tool creates is this culture of like empowerment and ownership. So as we're going into these collaborative delivery projects, right? You've got these teams that are now owning the outcome. So you've got this target that you've set, you're trying to reach that, and you feel this sense of ownership over it. So the contractors, specialists, the design partners, the owners are all working together in these like mini teams to be able to drive the cost that direction. And I think when you can visualize the information, you can see the impact that your ideas are coming up with. You have a place to go dump those ideas, and everyone can kind of see everything happen in real time. It just creates this really cool sense of kind of camaraderie and teamwork, as corny as that sounds, that really, energizes the team, I think. It inspires new ideas, and, just like any of us, like you set a goal and you're going to work hard to go achieve that goal, right? So by being able to like visualize that and see that, it's really creating that sense of ownership to be able to go do that.
I think for us, it just creates more alignment faster. With the ability to sort of code what's important, whether that's because of procurement or it's a major cost driver, it really helps us get the team aligned and working in the same direction. The design teams, the owner teams, they tend to want to focus on the end product and things that they want. They're not necessarily the most important things. So I think it gets us aligned and ultimately just takes a lot of stress out of the process.
Yeah, great. I think we can end on the note of saying that like your teams obviously build awesome stuff and they should be able to have fun doing it. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Derek. Thank you all in the audience for coming. We're in the exhibit hall if you want to come see more about Joint.